All right. A friend of mine asked me, "What is IT and how can I be a part of it?" He has a specific part he wants to be in, but that he's not the first person to ask me that. So I started creating this very simple kind of visual um, way of looking at it. I would say just to simplify that. There you go. So here I have a lot of information, so I'm going to try to break it down as simply as I can. Uh, so here I want to explain IT first of all means information technology or technologies, and an information technology can literally be just about anything if you think about it to the nth degree. For example, information technology is anything that has to do with using technology to store, spread, or use information. So that obviously that can be anything on the internet, that can be anything, that can be a book, that can be if you take the largest definition possible, that can be smoke signals, books, magazines, all of that stuff. So I don't really want to get into the definition too much, but IT, I'm going to just when someone tells me they want to get involved in IT, I know that they mean they want to get involved in like the internet, uh, companies that make software, companies that do hardware, that sort of thing. Not something that has to do with like editing books. I just know that because of experience. If somebody wants to get into editing books or into publishing books, I'm not the person to talk to, so I know that's not what they mean. So let's get started. The top of the iceberg is definitely communications. So the first thing people see when they think of IT is they see Facebook, they see blogs, they see YouTube, Twitter, all of these really big IT companies that allow people to communicate with each other through different means. But what a lot of people think about is that, well, I just got a message on my phone. There you go. Communications right there. But for there to be communication, you have to create content. Now, content can come in all kinds of forms: images, text, video, sound, um, podcasts, blogs, whatever. Content creation can come from people, it can also be automated, and that's a whole thing. Some of the terms I'll be using with this is design, user experience, functionality, front end. So let me explain that real quick. Design has to do with trying to figure out how you want something to be understood, used, experienced, and how you want it to function. Most people work their way down from here to the next steps that I'm going to talk about. So you have to store this information to be able to send it and use it. You need a platform to use your information and your content and to be able to communicate it. So, storing information is generally on servers. So, every website you visit, every time you send a text and it's saved, that's saved somewhere physically. And usually there's code that deals with that. So, we call that back end development when a programmer is developing code or programs for storing or for working for databases and all of that, um, keeping folders in some kind of hard drive. So on your phone, there's a hard drive. On your smartwatch, there's I wouldn't call it a hard drive, but there's a system to save information. It's technically a hard drive, but yeah. Anyhow, you have memory on there. Memory takes a completely different way of thinking and coding than front end code. So those are two completely separate specialties, but I'll get into specialties afterwards. Hardware, low end programming comes into hardware. Without programming, hardware is useless. It's just like I happen to have a spoon here. This is hardware. Is this information technology hardware? No, it's not. because it's not connected to anything. It doesn't save information unless I indent it a lot and like write something on it. That's sweet. Anyhow, so hardware without programming is generally useless. So a server that holds information for a website, it's hardware with its own specific programming with different languages than what you actually see coming from the website. For example, take any website or blog. The blog, the site is in HTML with CSS, uh, probably some PHP and JavaScript for everything that's cookies and running asynchronously. Those are also terms that are a mess to explain, but I'll try to explain those later. So the front end depends on the back end depends on the hardware, and all of these are specialties. The thing is, some people like myself have worked with all of these different uh, layers, all of these different parts of the pyramid of what an end user sees. And I've also done tech support for this sort of thing and some project management where I had to think about all of these things with the specialists. So you have people that have a general view of this, and then you have people that are specifically working like we'll have like someone who only works. Let's see how small I can get this button. Who only works here, like at the end of communication. This is like a YouTube creator or something. That's like all they do is communicate. They don't do any of this programming stuff. They create content and they send it out. That's it. Or a salesperson. They'll use somebody else's content that was designed by someone else and they'll be over here. Actually, YouTubers are probably somewhere in between these two because they're creating content and they're communicating it. Someone who's working on the new iPhone or OnePlus or whatever phone or computer, someone who's actually working on that would be in this hardware system down here, in the programming or the conception of new materials. There are a lot of different jobs in this. I actually think they're some of the coolest jobs in IT and computers because you're making the next generation of technology possible. All of these things depend on the hardware. It's just like gaming consoles. You can't have 3D games running on a computer that's not capable of generating a good 3D output. It's not complicated when you think about it, but you have to think about it. That's one of the things about IT. Depending on how far out you can think or how far out you can zoom from your job depends on your personality and character more than it depends on your job. And the way you do your job and the way you work with other people will depend a lot on that. That's one of the things I noticed. So, someone who only cares about how good something looks will be a designer in here. They they might complain that something's running slowly because they're like, "Oh, the user experience." If they think of the user experience, because a lot of designers only think, "Oh, it looks good, it's pretty." But design, especially nowadays, you have to think of mobile phones, which is hardware based. The screen size and screen resolution is hardware based. You have to think of how fast you're getting your information, so you have to work really well with back end developers and front end developers because most designers don't know how to code at all. And for designing functionality and thinking about the end user, but being a back end developer is very rare. Um, I don't. I did that when I was a back end developer. I would think about the end user's experience and thinking this information is going to go to this API and be used here. API is something I'll get into a bit later, but this is the basic structure for everything in IT. This structure kind of comes apart when you add the cloud and when you add APIs, which are, imagine a whole bunch of dots just working together and sending information back and forth with each other. Uh, Nodes is what we call them, like roots with knots is another way of looking at it, or a tree with branches. And all these branches like communicate back to the source, depending on how it's built. Those are a lot of images that are used. I would say most people don't have to understand the cloud to get into IT. They just have to understand front end, back end, design, user experience, functionality, and then understand a developer doesn't necessarily understand their whole company's workload or how their company works. Um, a mobile developer doesn't necessarily understand how a website works, and vice versa. Someone who makes websites doesn't necessarily understand how to make mobile apps. Someone who's really good at making WordPress websites, probably not very good at making e-commerce websites. Someone who's really good at making e-commerce websites might not be good at making basic branding websites. Someone who's really good at putting a computer together might not have a clue about how to write a line of code in any coding language. So all of these jobs exist. Then you have sales for the companies. You have the people who project managers who try to keep the teams working together well between all of these different specialties and the client. So they go back and forth between the client saying, "We want this." Then you have to understand what that means as far as functionality. So what the end user sees, which is up here. Then you have to figure out how can we do that with the technologies we have, which is in here, and sometimes in the hardware as well. And then with that, looking for cost efficiency, trying to actually do what was promised to the client. There are all kinds of jobs. Most of them are very technical, but a few of them are also client facing or working in a team, trying to get everybody to work together. Uh, work. You can be a technical project manager where you understand all of these different technical teams and individuals. Sometimes you'll have someone who's really great at Java development, making Android applications, or someone who just doesn't understand what he's doing and trying to send information through an API to an Android app from the back end, from the database. And these connections between people and technical specialties are usually, I think it's a good thing, generally run through someone who understands both and talks with each person about them. So this is just a basic overview of kind of what kind of jobs you can get. You can work in hardware, you can work in software, you can work in creating content, you can work in selling whatever of those somebody's made. And you can use IT to communicate and sell as well. So marketing, advertisement, those annoying ads that everybody gets all the time, would be up here in communications as well. You can keep in touch with your family through that part as well, but that doesn't make you money. So advertisement and marketing and design are high-end uses of IT. Storing information, coding that, coding an operating system like Windows is low end. It's close to the machine and not as close to humans. And you have everything on the spectrum, kind of like the rainbow of like closest to the machine and closest to people. And if you are an extreme in either of those, if you're extremely close to the machine and you understand software and hardware much better than you understand people, you should probably work in hardware or in back-end development. If you're really good at designing things and making things look great and just feel good to use and easy to use, go into design. If you're really good at selling things and you want to sell projects for a company, go into sales. And I would say that's up here with the communications. If you're really good at code, but you're also really good at making things feel good and look good, go into front end development. And if if you're really good at seeing the problems with things right away, you're detail oriented, and you can code a little bit, go into testing. Testing pays a lot of money if you can automate tests, because as we've all known, every single app, every single program or piece of software has bugs. Everything can break. Just like in the real world, anything virtual can break as well. So, like, I haven't found any bugs in this specifically because I don't know what I would be looking for. Anything that I would consider a bug or an anomaly, it's also a really good word to know, something that's not normal in the way the functionality was supposed to work for a program, is called an anomaly. QA is a big factor in projects getting done fast and well. So if there's nobody to test a project, that's generally a very bad sign. The efficiency and of the team actually delivering what was expected is going to go down. It's unlikely you will get the product you hoped for without testing because there are just so many variables. Somebody in the back end could have misunderstood something a designer said in a team meeting and done his own thing or her own thing while programming. Somebody could have screwed up the servers. Uh, Maybe the front end built something without talking to anyone else, and it wasn't compatible with the hardware or the back end's way of doing things, or they were using variables that didn't exist in the back end, the back office, or whatever. Back office and back end are different things. Back office means that the administrator sees this specific administration page that the other people, other users of this can't see. That would be a back office. Front office is the normal client user gets to see that. Back end is servers and databases. Front end is what people see on the front office and back office. That's front end, or the apps. Just more definitions right there. But this is really quick. I hope that's enough for you to understand kind of like what kind of jobs are out there. And when clients have problems, I forgot tech support, which I've actually done a little bit in project management and otherwise. If and also for my own clients as a sole proprietor, because I have my own business where I make websites and uh, do some consulting. So if anybody has questions about a project, like who to go to, how to get something done, whatever the project is, also if it's feasible, if they can do it or not, go ahead and contact me. I have contacts in every sphere of IT, so I can tell you what kind of business you need and if it's going to be expensive or not. But tech support is one of the least valued parts of an IT company, and it's one of the most important because they're the ones that clients call and complain to about everything wrong or badly thought out. So if a designer or a functionality specialist or user experience specialist messed up in their design, the first people that will know are tech support after clients, the first people that will know. So the first members of your company will actually be tech support because they're the ones that get the feedback. Testers don't get feedback from clients, which is kind of odd. Like something should maybe be changed in some structures for QA to be somewhere between tech support and QA. I'm not sure. It depends on how close they are to the machine, how close they are to people. That's a big, that's a very important variable when deciding how to use a team as well, like a team member, whether they can communicate well with people or not, and well with a machine or not. So IT has that kind of special place there. Uh, like IT tech support has that special place in this structure. There are a lot of specialist jobs. I can't even list them all, and there are a lot of different ways to do things. There are a million different ways to make a website. You can just do it in HTML. It'll look horrible, but it works. It's pretty simple. You don't need to know much about code. You can do it with HTML, CSS, Bootstrap, and all this stuff. Just make it look really nice, and then not have a database, so you're not using any information live. Nothing's automated, but it looks great. You can have moving things, and that's different coding language. You can have a database, use PHP, MySQL for that, and use some scripts to help with that as well. There are just so many different technologies. Um, I can't get into them all. Perl and C++, C Sharp. These all have best case uses, and some of them have uses that are new because somebody came up with a framework to use this language for this thing. There's some video games today where you can code inside the video game and change things. In Space Engineers, you can use C Sharp to code machines, even drones, to do what you want. You can make a drone dormant until it detects an enemy in the area, make it wake up and go attack it, or you can send a drone out to look for specific types of ore. That's just one example. Then you have a lot of the space kind of games have this integrated coding. Another one is Kerbal Space Program that you can code in that game, and I believe that one is C or C++. Those are some of the more common coding languages out there. Anyhow, I hope this was useful, and also there are many different types of things you can do. You can do video games, you can do software, you can do apps. You can. That's that's really that really depends on what your first contact is, what kind of job you get into, and your experience after that. Getting into video games is actually much more difficult than getting into websites or software. So I've worked for hundreds of millions of dollars worth of projects in industrial projects in different roles, and those were much easier to get into, for example, than video games, which would be down to the hundreds of thousands of dollars worth. So it's not even how much a project is worth that makes it hard to get in. It's really how picky the hiring person can be, so the HR manager can be. Um, for example, video games, there are so many people that want to just, oh, I love video games, I want to work in video games. And so they send their resume, and there are hundreds, maybe thousands of resumes, whereas a company that makes some kind of AI controlled box will have one or two. I mean, it's whatever makes you happy, I guess. The least fun sounding jobs are the ones where you have the likeliest chance of getting a job and the highest chance of getting really good experience and a really good resume afterwards. So don't overlook those. A lot of people want to start making money right away when they get into IT. I would start what I did, and I would say anybody should follow kind of this kind of examples. Go for a really low pay, and maybe even not being paid for 3 to 6 months if you can, and just learn. Go in for really low pay employment, get the experience, and use that experience as a trampoline to get into higher paying jobs and better jobs, and then find out what you want to do specifically, because there are so many specialties out there, and as soon as you specialize you get paid more. Also, try to get better at what you do. Try to never be stagnant, or never slow down in learning. IT is something that does not forgive stagnation. If you stagnate, you die. You disappear, you become outdated within a few months if you don't keep up with it, in most cases. So yeah, that's kind of my little take on IT. I hope this was helpful, and if you have any questions or you want to ask me to do other videos about other subjects, don't hesitate. Um, I'll just jump in and do something real quick. Have a good day.